Hi everyone, on here coming to you with actually a yearly guide with what's going on in the codes. And for those that aren't familiar with my work, I am an energy mentor, also known as a coding interpreter. And I know a lot of people don't know so much what's a coding interpreter. It's basically the same thing. What I do is I mentor people with energy patterns and what's present for them personally, what's present in the world, what's going on. And this kind of really helps them to be able to focus in and create things in their life, find solutions in their life, just get understanding about where to find their flows. So I have all kinds of things along that line that I do. And with this work, I really help people in their spiritual path and what they're dealing with in life to live more compassionately, um, and to just get a life that they can enjoy a little bit more, and to work with their natural currents and flows and what's happening and be in that divine alignment, which is such a powerful place to be. And sometimes we avoid those paths because we think it's so hard, it's so difficult, it's so challenging, and it doesn't feel very good at times. But, really, when we get into it, the rewards are unbelievable. And we don't get those rewards, so to say, those gifts, those blessings, unless we do the work. And so my work helps people do that work in there. I have a gift for understanding patterns, energetic patterns, what's going on with them. And there's always multiple patterns that are overlapping and interacting together. And every day of every year has a little different vibration to it. And of course, any place in the world that we are has a little different vibration and how those vibrations play out. So granted, I can't cover every person at every place all over the world at one time, but I think the general influences, when we look at them, definitely help people to be in the flow and be in the current. So, one of the things I do is every year I put out this book here, which is called The Code Journey. And every year a new edition is put out. It's kind of a thick book in a way, but when you look at this, it's really a great daily guidebook. It helps us to be alert to things that are happening in our world, things that are where the currents are at. And this kind of allows us to work with compassion and with foresight and to work from foundations of truth and wisdom, to make smart choices in things, to be wise about things, and to just not be caught off guard. Because when you have a little bit of foresight, it's not that you're knowing exactly what's going to happen. It's not like you're going to say at this date, on this time, this particular thing is going to happen with these particular people. But you understand that maybe people are going to be more on edge that day, or they're going to be a little more generous that day. And that makes a difference in how we approach them. That makes a difference in the space we need to hold ourselves in. It also helps us know, which times maybe are a little bit better for certain activities or making requests on things, and which times we're better just to sit back a little bit and be patient with things. So it's a great tool that way. That's the way I work with it. It's as a tool, as a way to just kind of have some guidance, and it overlaps and works with a lot of different belief systems, which is nice. It integrates over 50 different modalities, none of which are used in the traditional way. So that is what I'm drawing on. And certainly, if you head to my website, compassioncodes.com, you'll be able to pick up your copy. I don't know, I'm not getting it very clear in the camera there, but you'll be able to pick up your copy. There's direct links to the purchase pages, whether you want an ebook version or a paperback version. I like the paperback because it's big and I can mark lots of places in it. And that's really helpful for me. So, again, that website's compassioncodes.com, and the link is in the notes down there. So, anyways, in this video, I try to do this once a year to just kind of put an overview out there for people. And of course, there's going to be much more detail in the book than what I can share here, but I'm going to do a summary of things here. And this is probably going to be a long video because there's a lot of information that's going on, a lot of things that are happening. But one of the things I'm letting people know about this year is that we have this beautiful abundance energy. We have some really great prosperity energy and success energy going on. And the thing that concerns me about this is that, well, this is great, and I think it's really needed, and it will give a lot of people hope, and it will give a lot of people um, the sense that there is possibility and the ability to do something for themselves and to meet the needs that they have and things like that. A lot of the time, abundance gets very mixed up in what people think it is because a lot of people just think it is wealth. Now, there can be wealth that comes with it, but abundance a lot of times is much more of an internal process. It's about divine connection that we have. But I do see that I think there is going to be some good fortune coming through for people. And when that good fortune is coming through, it may not be the big stuff that some people out there are waiting for or hoping for or desiring to have. So don't jump to those conclusions like, oh my gosh, this great reset is happening. Yes, there's big transitions and transformations happening. But is it what they're hoping for and what they're wanting? I can't say that with absolute certainty. But whether it is that or whether it isn't that, whether it's smaller little flows of things, like in the US, they talk about giving us these dividends or, sending out this funds to people and things like that. So whether it's something smaller or something bigger, and again, a windfall sometimes isn't some big financial piece. It can also just be blessings that we get in for things that we need or gifts that we receive from others in various ways. And we just don't want to get reckless in that. So many people that I see, it's like lottery winners, it's like, oh my God, I won $5 million in the lottery, and now I'm going to go buy a $2.5 million house. Well, by the time their taxes come out of that, and then they buy their house, and then they've got, taxes on the house and property taxes that they're like, I don't know how to afford this. And then they end up having to sell it and get rid of it, and they lose it, and they end up in worse debt than before because they try to maintain this expensive lifestyle they jumped into and things like that. So we have to use caution because when we look further down the line, and that's what I always try to do, well, what's coming down the line? Do we have the luxury or the leeway to go out and just spend the way we want to spend and spend to human desires and excess and all of that? When I look over the next 3 years, we really don't have that luxury. We need to make sure we set up a reserve. We need to make sure that we're taking care of needs over desires first. So that means do all the practical pieces first. And if you've got some left over, then great, go enjoy yourself a little bit. Nothing wrong with doing that, especially when you're young and you're capable and you're physically able of doing things. Do those things. But first, look at paying off a car loan. Look at setting yourself up for stability, if that means getting into a house but staying reasonable, setting aside that rainy day fund to take care of emergencies, because there will be some hard times coming up over the next 3 years, and they're not going to be things we can plan for or things that we can expect. So we need to make sure that we have something set aside to deal with those things. When we start to look at what's excess, again, where do we want to put our priorities? I'm suggesting to people right now, go take your trips to see family. Go do some of that type of travel, because we're in a world that's so unpredictable and we do have so many things that are going to hit in different ways. And it's not going to be all pleasant all the time. There are going to be these points that are going to be these transitions or endings with things or health things coming up or residual stuff that we're dealing with from previous years as we're closing some of these cycles out right now. And when that's happening, you don't want to miss the opportunity to spend time with family. You don't want to miss that opportunity to connect with them. But we also don't want to be putting ourselves in debt for things that aren't needed. So again, take care of your needs first, then look at your practical excesses. Like I said, visiting with family and having that time and sharing that time together. Uh, and then look at the more frivolous stuff, or even in between there, if you have clothes that need to be replaced or repairs that need to be done on where you're living, take care of those practical things first and then see what's left. And again, make sure you've got a little something extra. Because unfortunately, what happens for a lot of people is they get so excited by a little bit of wealth or a little bit of good fortune, and then they just go spend it all. And then they end up in a bigger detriment or fall right back into the hardships again. And I don't want to see people fall into the hardships. Part of the work that I do is when we get you out of the hardships, we want to keep you out of those hardships. Hopefully, you're learning enough that you're not falling back into those hardships. And yes, it takes work and it's a process and it takes time to get through stuff and to learn some of these things. But when we embrace them and we really go into them, it really works out well for us. So let's get going on this. And like I said, because I know this is going to be a really long video, so I'm just going to say I'm sorry up front, but there's a lot to cover on this. And when we look at abundance, again, with that energy, abundance is not about all these material acquisitions. Realize that because this is about letting spirit flow through us, flow into every aspect of our life, allowing God, divine source, to be present. That's what activates being able to receive the material things because you have to be fulfilled in here in your heart. You have to have that happiness in there. If you're angry, if you're holding frustration, if you're holding greed or things like that, a lot of times the money won't stick, or it'll be some sort of false money that comes through, or false successes that come through that leave you in just tremendous insecurities. They're not really giving you the peace that true abundance gives you. The other thing about abundance is a lot of it has to do with self-sufficiency and freeing ourselves from power structures, freeing ourselves from being under the control of other people. And that's one of the things that happens when we get out of debt, we're giving ourselves freedom. We may not be living a luxury lifestyle, but we give ourselves a peace of mind and ease that can't be replaced with anything else because we are no longer as controllable. There's no longer things that could be shut off on us when we're in that space. So it's a very powerful piece of work when we get into this true abundance. It deals a lot with generosity, so not just hoarding everything. When we do have some excesses, sharing that with people that are in need, putting it towards things that help those that are struggling, our animals, our planet, doing things for it, whether that's creating our own gardens or whatever it is, depending on what your so-called passion is and what you like to help, and or people, people who are struggling that are trying to help themselves. So we're going to delve into this a bit more and some of the other currents that are involved in this year. Um, there's also a lot of just when we look at these patterns of abundance in here, we've also got this responsibility energy coming up, but it's also um, a lot of doing things smart, doing things wisely, let's say, using our power wisely, using our resources wisely. Because when we do that, that's where we can create the windfalls. Whereas if we're not using our power very wisely, we're going to create greater detriments and hardships for ourselves. And we're going to see that some countries that are going down unfavorable paths, they're making unfavorable decisions. They're trying to gain a lot of control. They're under a more dictatorial structure. They're taking rights and freedoms and things away from the people, trying to control every minute thing in their life. Those countries are going to see a harder fall. They're going to see some really tough things, especially if people don't stand up and say no and clear out that corruption. But in other countries, there's where they are putting the power back into the hands of the people, where they are, there's always some risk involved, but where everything is a much more of a sure deal, a proven tactic to a certain extent. And it is giving back to its citizens, then those are the countries we're going to see thrive. And those are going to be countries that flourish, and they're going to be strong on their own, and they're not going to be reliant on other countries for resources. I think to a certain extent, we all have a little bit of resources. Every country has something that they may be reliant on another country for somewhat. but for the most part, they have to learn the resources in their own country and do their best to work within those resources because that's what's going to make their country strong in there. So with that being said, every year has this unique imprint on it. Every year has a unique code pattern, energetic pattern. No two are exactly alike. Even when we run through these cycles and we cycle through like, every 9 years we go through a similar pattern, but also every 9 years we're dropping off energy patterns and we're taking on other energy patterns. And so even when we're repeating patterns, the patterns are not identical because there's other sets of influences that are shifting and changing that we will only see once in our lifetime. So it creates a unique interaction of energies that is never going to truly be 100% duplicated again. If it is, it would be thousands or tens of thousands or whatever year down the line. I'm not sure we'd ever see maybe even a total exact duplicate of things in there. So, looking at that, this is going to be an interesting thing. So, one of the big points in 2026 is we are coming full circle on things. And the full circle moments, what we're doing is we're returning to some point of origin, some point of beginning, or coming back to a point that we've started in some way. So this is kind of like if you take a vacation, right? And you go out, you have your fun, and then you return home, you've kind of come full circle, and then you pick right back up where you left off in life. That's one type of full circle moment, so to say. Now, it can also be when we're repeating an experience and but we're standing in a different position or time. So this can be, for example, like um, when we go through being a child in life, right? And that child then experiences their own birth, their own growth. They get older, they get married, and then they have their own kids. And then when they have their own kids, they're having sort of this full circle moment because they're going back into living from some of the child perspectives and things. They're also probably reconnecting a lot of times with their own childhood and what they experienced at different ages of life as they watch their own kids go through those stages of life. So that's kind of a full circle moment. And it can also take a form of like the past resurfacing. And when we see this happening, this can be an opportunity for second chances or to show us what is not resolved in our life that we need to close out and resolve. So this is any of the things we're maybe holding on to from our past in there. So sometimes we go through life and the timing is just not right for something, or we're not ready for it, or we're not in the space to accept it. But as we age and we get a little bit older, it's like we shift, our wants, our needs shift, and then we're ready to accept something. Or maybe just circumstances in life. We weren't able to pursue whatever our passion was when we were younger, and things come around, and then we get an opportunity to pursue that again. And so there's many ways that we can come into this full circle moment. And, sure, we can take a lot of turns along the way. Sometimes some wrong turns, make some poor choices, and then we might end up right back where we started from. And then we have to decide, okay, is this a path I want to keep going down, or is this something different that I want to delve into? So our cycles at this point in 2026 have basically finished. And now we're in the transition between the old cycle and the new cycle, the old things and the new things. And this is the big transition that we're going between. And at the same time, we're also just putting our foot into what is new. What is the new beginning? What is the fresh uh, new piece that we're moving into? So this is very similar to entering a new year, right? The old year is done. The old year is done. And now we're entering a brand new year. And we have some fresh energy to work with. We're getting a fresh start on things. I mean, that's when a lot of people start to begin things with the new year. It's like, okay, I've got the fresh energy there. So, kind of similar in that capacity for us. And at this point, pretty much everything that we can do has been done. That doesn't mean that there aren't things that won't be done or can't be done, but everything that we need to do in the cycle is complete, basically. And we may just be seeing a lot of things playing out at this point. There's still a little bit of variation and a little bit of leeway when we're in this transition stage. So it's not completely entered into the new phase yet, but it's starting there. If we allow ourselves to use our power wisely, or we're unresponsible, and sitting in a pile of debt, for example, um, if we didn't make good choices in the past, then we're going to have to probably deal with some very tough circumstances, hard challenges, hard falls, and that's going to force some hardships and hard changes. And for some people, that's not going to be pleasant. Definitely, there's a lot of people that have just gone after every, latest tech, every latest clothing. They haven't worked within their budgets. They've gambled on things that have had like a 1% chance of paying off for them, going down paths that really were not going to work. But they were living on this glory, like going to a casino and going, I'm just going to gamble until I win. Well, yeah, some people get lucky, but not very many. Most people lose. And so, the people that haven't used their power wisely, they're going to be in for some pretty hard things to deal with. It's like if you're already in debt and then you gamble with resources that you don't have, and then you end up further in debt. So now you're in a greater hardship than when you started before you did the gamble. That's kind of the energy that they will be dealing with. Our choices over the last several years, so you think the last 9 years in particular, have put us onto the path that we experienced this year. So what we start experiencing this year is the result or the culmination of the choices we've been making the last 9 years over this past cycle and things. But we need to be careful. Instead of being a victim to our circumstances, we need to learn how our actions have put us into our positions. And that's very important, because if we don't learn how we got into the detriment, we can't fix the detriment, right? I talk about this in world affairs. It's so easy to just dish out help to people. But if you never look at why people are in that position to start with and what is creating that, misfortune, then you're never going to fix it. You're just going to create more issues going forward. So you have to stop and go, well, why is this happening? Why are people struggling so much? What is behind this? And then go, okay, let's fix those things. And so that's kind of a similar choice. Our choices are so important, and we need to acknowledge, we need to come honest with ourselves and acknowledge, okay, this is where I've been reckless in spending. Okay, I didn't need to be doing certain things. This is where I got lazy. This is where I've been excessive. And most people don't want to admit that, because they just think, well, everybody else has this. Well, okay, everybody else is probably also in debt too and having issues as well. And, that doesn't mean that you weren't excessive just because everybody else was doing it. It's like, everybody else is drinking the poison. That doesn't make the poison safe. So it's one of those things that we have to look at, and we have to be willing to acknowledge our poor choices. And this is not anything necessarily to be shame or guilt. I mean, we all make bad choices along the way. We all make some mishaps along the way. We need to learn from them. We need to fix them. And this is the year to make those corrections, correct our paths while we're in this transition before we get momentum going into another cycle fully. If things are flowing well, then we need to recognize how our choices to stick with certain things that were solid and practical and responsible played into being in good fortune. So again, this reflecting on experiences, how did our choices play out for us? Very important to do. Now, some may have a hard year based on their choices and their cycles. And, we all have these personal year cycles going on too. So, sometimes influences in the world in general can be very good, but then our personal cycles are dealing with certain challenges that we need to face and deal with. Sometimes though, we get that balanced off. If the world has good influences going on, we get a little bit of balance and it's not as harsh, or vice versa. If the world has a lot of challenging influences and then our personal influences are good, it may not be flowing as good as it could be. But that's okay, just acknowledging that for some people, they are still going to have challenges even with the abundance energy, because of their own personal cycles and because of maybe where their awareness is, what they've been able to accept or not accept, and what they're rejecting, what they're willing to be accountable on, things like that. And if there's hardships that are present, we need to figure out what put us into those hardships. That comes back to the whole choice thing in there. And hardships happen a lot when we live beyond our means, when we're hoping that something miraculously shows up to take care of us. There's certain things out there. We see it, I see a lot of people in the Nisara Jasara movement, for example, not making any judgments one way or another, but they're just waiting for this big windfall to come in and take care of them and give them whatever they desire. And our aspect of working with energy wisely is not about waiting for those things to manifest. It's deciding how we can work with what we have and getting creative and thinking outside of the box and seeing what we can do, because some people just believe that things in their life, like owning a house or things like that, will never be possible without something like that happening, which isn't true. Um, yes, there are things that need to be corrected to make it easier for people to get into homes and things, but it doesn't mean that the only way they're going to have certain basic things in life is for that to happen. So we have to be very careful on some of those things, especially if we're putting a lot of energy into them. Um, because some of those things are not going to happen the way that people have been told that they're going to happen. And again, we want to embrace the blessings. We want to build our own abundance from within first, because even if something like that happens, if we don't have the abundance within, we're not going to be able to hold anything that we get. We've got to have the abundance within us first. And so this is a great foundational year to build that abundance to make some of these other things a possibility in there. Um, I look at this again, an example being if you want to have your own house and there's no resources to buy one, you may need to start smaller. You've got to start with the smaller chunks. You don't just jump into a mansion. You start with a piece of land. Maybe you camp on the land. Maybe you get then, some more resources, and maybe you get a little trailer or mobile home or shed that you can work with for a while. And then after that, you can start working and getting your own house built or put up, or sell what you have and shift into a small fixer and do some of the work yourself. And then once you do that, then maybe you can resell that and go into something nicer. You've got to be willing to take the steps. It's not about just jumping to the end result. Abundance isn't really about that. It is a process to build it. So again, a lot of people just want the windfall these days. They want to skip all those steps. And windfalls rarely work out that way. They rarely work out that way. Do a couple of people happen that way? Absolutely. But for most people, they don't work that way. And many people, right, they get focused on that quick solution, that easy route. It's like, just give it to me. Just give me the fortune and the windfall, but they miss all of the value that comes from creating their fortune when they do that. And I'll tell you, there is nothing like that. You can't replace that value of creating it yourself. So again, I'm encouraging people to learn, how to create it themselves, and to not just sit around, because there's so much joy and there's so much to be gained out of that process. There's a real joy in residing in a house that you developed, that you fixed, that you created along the way, as opposed to one that was just already there. Of course, this varies at different points in our life, because right when you're 70, 80 years old, you're not necessarily going to start building a house from scratch or doing some of that work. But even so, even if you hire other people to do it, there is still something about having the work done yourself, being involved in it, being connected to it, having to earn it, having to put in the effort for it that makes a huge difference. Now, this year is good for well thought out risks. Again, the difference between a calculated risk and gambling on things. So those calculated risk, it's like drawing up a business plan. Okay, I need to be able to cover myself for 5 years before I'm going to be able to start turning a profit or getting my money back on something. And if I do this, I've got to have all of these expenses covered, and here's my expense, and here's my possible income level. And of course, you always want to overestimate your expenses, underestimate your income on there. And when you do that, you're going to come to a much more reasonable, realistic space. And then if you do better, then that's great. But you want to be able to make it, on the higher end of expenses and the lower end of income for something that you're taking a risk on. And you don't want to put out anything that you can't afford to lose. And again, not put yourself in debt overdoing something. So as you do these things, you minimize your risk. You're doing things from a very practical, grounded mindset. And you're looking at it like when drawing up a formal business plan, you can actually see if something's realistic or not before you get into it. So if something's really well thought out and it has a really high chance of paying off, when I talk about high chance of paying off, I'm talking like 75, 80, 90%, 95% chance of paying off, then great. It can be a good year to take a risk as long as you stay practical in what you're doing. But if you're gambling with resources you don't have, again, you're going to just lose. You're going to put yourself in devastation doing that. You get down to something that, again, like winning the lottery or something, your chances of that are so low of hitting the big jackpot. Yes, there are people that hit it, but for the average person, when you look at all the millions, billions of people that are playing for that jackpot and one person gets it, you know, your chances of getting it are so low. So it becomes kind of that's a gamble and something that tends to pull you into greater detriment or loss. Um, this a lot too connects with the law of cause and effect. So if you use credit cards because you don't have money in the bank to get something or to take care of something or to do it, that's not money that you actually have to work with. Okay. Working from speculation. Well, this should be coming to me, but you can't rely on the should be's. You have to rely on what you have in hand to work with. Okay. Because those should be's, like, how many times have people had a really secure, stable job and they think, oh, well, I should be bringing in, X amount of money every year, so I have no problem affording this big, expensive home. And then all of a sudden they lose their job and they can't afford that home anymore. Okay, you can't work on the should be's. That's not a strong risk there. A lot of us do that because we're looking at it saying, well, I'm bringing in, X amount of money on my salary, therefore I can afford X amount of money on my loan payment or my rent or whatever. But we got to look at that law of cause and effect aspect. So, many people think they're just going to pay things off, but again, it doesn't end up working that way because the amount of interest and everything else on those credit cards, for example, just adds, all of a sudden that $100 item becomes $500 that you're paying off. So it's not just the expense itself anymore in there. And I know a lot of people don't think about that. And that's one of the tricks of credit cards is to make you think that you have all kinds of money that you don't have in there. So unless you could pay it off immediately, at the time of purchase, and if you can pay it off immediately at the time of purchase, just pay cash. Just pay the cash for it. Um, so, things to consider in there. But credit cards are meant to put us further in debt. They're part of the slave system. They're not meant to really help us in there. They're meant to make profit for companies and for individuals that own those companies. Um, they're not meant to help people. And they usually don't. They usually create more stress, worry, anxiety, deplete their abundance, and all of those types of things. They're meant to create addictive spending and luxury spending and spending for things that we can't afford in there. And that's part of the big detriment we've gotten into in many cases. Now, if we take a chance on something again that we've looked very thoroughly, that's all going to work out pretty good. So this year we are in big transition and we're shifting into new cycles, new ways of living, new ways of doing things. So I think we're going to have some pretty big changes unfolding this year. This can create uncertainty for people because it is new, it's different than what they've been living under or how they've been living or the way they've been doing things. And so that's going to be big for a lot of people. When we look back in time, when we want to get an idea for the magnitude of the types of shifts that we're talking about, in most recent years, we can go back to 2017 or 2008. Those are the types of big transitions. When we go back into 2008 and, you get back into big events that happened around that time. And you can look them up. You can just go online and Google, well, what happened in these years? And that will give you an idea of the type of magnitude of shift and change that we're in for. Of course, 2008 had a big economic crash. I think if lessons haven't been learned from that and enough changes aren't made, then there could be bigger crashes coming along the way. And we have this big shift happening again. We have it several other times that are going to happen, uh, during the 2000s here. It'll happen again, 2035, 2044, 2053, 2062, 2071, and 2080. Those will all be big transition points and periods that we see happening. So these are always points in time that are opportunities to look over how we're living our lone life, what we're being pushed into, what we need to focus on. And in these big transition years, we are being asked to stand in our wholeness. We're being asked to be in the soul self during these times because that is what unfolds the blessings that we get. We're being asked to be in that space and not in our human desires, our wants, our addictions, because those are going to pull us under deeper and take us into bigger and deeper spirals and things. So when we're in that divine alignment, we will be in our wholeness. And we have, when we're in that divine alignment, when we're holding that soul connection, we can't easily be pushed into things that are not going to work for us, that won't benefit people and animals and the earth. So this is a very important point to hold. I mean, it's always important to hold, but especially in the transition years, it's very important. Just like we're kind of inching into the new beginnings and the fresh starts and having kind of one foot in the new cycle, we've still got one foot in the old cycle in there. So we're kind of in this bridge space there, and we're just finishing the final stages of things, completing things, starting to plan what we need to carry out, what needs to go forward. So this is kind of like finishing, the foundation of a house and then starting the construction on it. You're finishing up the foundation pieces that have to be in place in order for the house to be built. Same type of thing happening in our world, in our society, in our lives, where we're finishing up that foundation and we want to take the time to make sure that foundation is strong so that whatever we build on it is going to last a really long time and it's not going to be able to be brought down or destroyed easily in there. So I also say it's like taking the final bag of garbage out when you're moving out of one place and starting to unpack the boxes in your new place. You're kind of in both at the same time to a certain extent in there. And so that's really, beneficial from that aspect. Now, when we do have good fortune come through, or if we do have some windfalls happening for our lives, we want to make sure that, again, we're using that to prepare for rough times and challenges. We got to get some set aside, get that nest egg put in place. Don't be the reckless person in it. Don't spend unwisely. Don't just go put it on all kinds of extravagant things. And it's tempting, right? Like if you haven't had a vacation in a long while, it's really tempting to go, wow, we've got this extra money. Let's go take a really nice vacation in a really top-notch, $1,000 a room night place. That's going to destroy you. That's going to destroy you, because I watch people do that and they do those sorts of things and they think, I'm okay, I've got all this money. And they go and they take that extravagance. And then the next thing they know, they have to buy a new car and they don't have the money to do it. So they don't get that money to fulfill their needs because they spent it on something extravagant. So pace yourself out again, focus on the needs first in there. And this is, I talked about no different than starting a business. Um, we want to initiate a new cycle by taking actions that lead in favorable directions. So we want to do some reflection. What is going to move me in a favorable direction? What is going to point me towards more stability, more stronger foundation with things? What is going to help provide for me moving forward in life? And you know, let's start the cycle off with that kind of mindset. Because again, if we end the cycle with excess, I mean, we always have ways we can spend the excess. That's never going to be a problem. Okay. But we want to make sure, again, those needs are taken care of first. We want to make sure that the necessities are covered in life first. So those who are, again, really careless and reckless and use their resources for lavish lifestyles, are most likely going to lose everything that they gain and then some in there. So let's not do that. The wise choices, the wise use of power, that's going to set that fortunate future in motion. So abundance is really going to be unfolding from our own efforts. Again, we have to put forth the effort. We have to realize that no matter what we have something to share. We have something that we have an excess of. Maybe that's an excess of wisdom that we can share. Maybe that is an excess of time that we can sit and listen to people who need to be heard. There's all kinds of ways that we sit in abundance. And again, when we stop attaching it to material resources, we get to actually feel it. And when we actually feel it, we let go of the pain and the suffering. We don't feel that pain or suffering. We're not in a space of deprivation. We're not sitting in the worry or the anxiety or things like that, even when resources are sparse. We're not sitting in those deprivation and victim mindsets in there. So, this is no different when we look at putting the effort in. It's no different than not being paid for hours until you work them. You know, um, if we don't see things through all the way, our successes are going to get cut off. Our abundance is going to get cut down. Um, you know, you're not going to be paid for hours until you work for those hours. I don't get paid for my book until I finish my book. Okay. So you have to put the effort in to get the results. And that's a big part of abundance. If you want to see what the results, if you want things to work out, the effort has to be made there. This year asks us to really consider all of life when doing things. So not just ourselves, but how are our choices affecting other life in there? And this is going to be probably some touchy and sometimes a battleground for people of where we draw the line on that. And again, being able to identify the needs versus the wants or the desires or being taken in by the people who don't need, who try to want us to believe they're in need, those sorts of things. And we really need to stop and think about the full impact before we move forward with certain things. Otherwise, again, we can bring our own demise. I see this with a lot of the so-called green technologies, the things that they call environmentally friendly, different things with technology, some of the aspects with some of the wind towers and the solar panels and stuff like that. And, so many people rushed into it from this urgency space and they didn't really think things through. They didn't really go all the way through the process. And ironically, it was a lot of environmentalists that didn't think it through. It was just like, oh, it's urgent. We have to do this right now, and we have to do something, as opposed to finding a true solution that wouldn't be detrimental. And ironically, a lot of these so-called green climate friendly solutions are not that at all. They're actually much more destructive to the environment. We've been sold on, for example, oil being a limited resource, and it's not. There's actually aspects of that where the earth can replenish that. So there's so much more that people haven't been told in there, and you can research into some of those little tidbits if you want to go down those rabbit holes if you want to. I've been down them, looked at them, and so you know eh, knock yourself out doing it. But you got to sort through things, because so many of these things, if you're seeing them come up from the environmental agencies, they're probably not giving you the truth on a lot of them in there. So we do, we're never going to save the planet by destroying it. And a lot of the Save the Planet initiatives are destroying the planet in their process. So, definitely some things to think about that we have to be mindful of. 2026 asks us to know that we've got enough, to realize we are enough, to realize we don't have to have these excesses. We don't have to have these luxuries. And the more we search after that greed and those luxuries, the more disconnected we become from God and divine source. So it's not a beneficial piece for us. True abundance and flourishing is not based on what we have. It's based on knowing who and what we really are. There's a deep one for you to think about. It's not based on what we have, but knowing and embracing who and what we really are. And that's way beyond any material thing in there. Um, Definitely some good things to delve into. Um, when we look at this, we're going to see a lot of humanitarian programs favored. So, my hope in some of this energy is we actually are going to have a focus that's going to go into truly humanitarian initiatives. And when I see this, this is the type of thing that makes me lean towards we could see some of the shutting down of like certain research labs, which are or animal testing divisions of those research labs. We can see the true protection of animal rights. Again, not forcing certain inoculations on them. There's times and there's places and there's situations for things, but also, again, cleaning those things up so that they are not damaging, so that you're not giving, the inoculation that you would give an 80-pound dog, and you don't want to give that same inoculation to a 10-pound cat. Um, so there's variances like that, that it's just, and there are things out there where they use the same dosage no matter what. And it's not going to hit the animal the same way. It's not humane by any means. Again, a lot of things that we've been told were humane are not necessarily humane. And this comes back to us. I think a lot of people feel a little lost, a little helpless in some of this, but I think what we're going to do is, again, see this shift away from supporting the chemicals and the pharmaceutical companies and having those resources redirected into things like regenerative farming. Maybe there's tax breaks for people who are more self-sufficient, and not having to draw on public utilities or different things like that. I think there's going to be more incentives into what truly helps people, what truly is humanitarian, a bigger focus on the people who are truly in need, not the people who are drawing off the system, not the fraudulent schemes that are around the systems, or connected into them, but cutting off the funding from the fraudulent sections and really doing things that are truly beneficial. So for example, people buy health insurance, and a lot of the health insurance isn't giving them that much these days. It's expensive, it's high priced, the deductibles are high, things like that. And they're paying out a lot of money. Now, for somebody who's not really a doctor person and they prefer more holistic treatments, imagine if they just had a fund that they could work with for natural remedies, like for preventative care. Because your preventative care, like going to a massage therapist, like you could go to a massage therapist once a week. And for most people, they can spend less on that massage therapist once a week or that chiropractor or something like that and spend less than what they pay in their health insurance. And then they're not getting sick and they're not having the big issues. When we focus on the preventative care, we're not dealing with the big bad deep illnesses. If we are cleaning up the pharmaceutical industry, then we are not having people be as sick. This has been such a profit area, and it's been at the expense of people, and mostly at the expense of the people who can least afford it and who are already struggling tremendously. It's scary, some of the requirements that they have for people who are struggling. So, like people on disability, people on some of the welfare aspects. And if you do not have somebody that you can assign to make decisions should you become incapacitated, the state has the right to take over and make all the decisions for you and decide what you're going to do and what you're going to have. And, on one hand, you understand that, but on another hand, there's a huge danger zone in that, especially depending on your state and what they're doing. So I think we're going to see this kind of redivestment of funds, and that will be part of the true humanitarian. I don't think it's necessarily about going through these big organizations like it has been, or going through organizations like the UN. They're not, government run. They're not elected officials in those organizations like the WHO, the UN. Um, but putting the emphasis on cleaning up the food supply, which is going to make a difference for everybody. Making the food healthier again and not having all these poisons put into the food or not allowing certain things to be sprayed on the food. I mean, you've got organic farmers, and some of the things they're allowed to spray on their crops are worse than what non-organic farmers use. So it's like you have to be so careful when you're looking at this stuff. So if we can get more into those preventative layers, that's where we're really going to see the benefit on things. But fortunately, I do think that there's going to be a lot of emphasis uh, put on that and a lot of breaking down and collapsing of the false humanitarian structures because a lot of them have relied on government funding, not just private funding, but government funding to survive. And they've used it to launder and shift money between each other. We look at these NGOs and things like that. And I think we're going to see the collapse of some of them. And I don't think that's going to be a bad thing, honestly. I think honestly, it can get things more directly to the people and be put into things that will be more beneficial for the people. But of course, each country is going to make their decisions about that. Um, those in positions of authority and command, they need to be using humanitarian structures to help everyone, not just a few, not just the people that they want for voters, those sorts of things. They've got to really be putting it through to true help. We're asked to have the courage to step into the unknown, and stepping into the unknown, the reality of it is we can't see everything. We can't know everything ahead. We can do a lot of projecting or forecasting. Through probability of things, but we don't know 100%. So we've got to be able to deal with that. And if things are well thought out, the preparations are made, we're well prepared, we're in divine alignment, then we really won't have anything to fear when the unexpected things come up. And we can see our way through the unforeseen circumstances. This is going to be a good year where a lot of people can probably move forward with their own ideas and their own plans in things. And if they're helping others, in addition to moving their own things forward, then there can be even greater successes that come out of that. And this is a year where seeds that we have planted in the past, whether that's the last 6 months, I would say 6 months ago in particular, um, but going back a year, 2 years, or a few years even in the last cycle, the seeds that we've been planting are what we're going to see growing in 2026. So this is where we've already put the effort into things. So it's more about living things out, the more the results coming forward as it is um, opposed to creating just totally new things in there. Yes, there's going to be some new things too, but a lot of what the successes we see are coming from work that's already been done. It's kind of like things that maybe a leader of a country has set in motion, and now they're going to start taking effect, type of thing. There are connections to mother energy and eternity coming up in 2026. So we want to explore our connections with women, with the feminine aspects. Now, this isn't about the feminist movement. That's a whole different thing, but we do need to honor and bring in the feminine energy. This is about harmonizing and balancing and not exclusiveness and seeing the sacredness in it. There's a sacredness in the masculine energy, there's a sacredness in the feminine energy, but the feminine energy is about care and nurturing. It's about our ability to receive caring and nurturing from other people as well. Uh, it's the mother figures. We're probably going to see more emphasis put on mothers and the family unit because there's been so much that has underestimated this unit. And I'll tell you, there's no force in the world like a mama bear who's riled up, literally and proverbially, in there. And there's been so much that has been used to create division, to separate children from their mothers um, over the last several years. It's not been just the last decade because this has been happening over time, but it's been a way to, on one hand, they're saying, oh, the feminist movement, let's throw them into the workforce and that's equality and that's this and that's that. But forcing people into that as opposed to honoring the sacredness and how important that mother role is in the family, just like the father role is incredibly important. What they were really doing, it really wasn't about women's rights. It was really about breaking up the family unit, getting mothers separated from their child so that the child wasn't getting that caring or that nurturing. And yes, there are people that can argue those far and few between cases to a certain extent of unfit mothers. But would they have been unfit mothers if their role was held sacred? It's hard to say. We can't say with 100% certainty, but definitely the mother energy is a big part of things flourishing and prospering in our world, in our families, in our units, in our personal lives, all of those things. So without the feminine presence and the mother energy, everything fades away. You lose a lot of the creation aspect um, in the world, and that won't be a good thing. You lose the nurturing, you lose the caring, you lose the human component, which is also a spirit component. The human component is not just third dimensional. There's also a God component in that, a divine source component in that, that is so important. And we've seen this attacked, eugenics, other agendas that have targeted and attacked the mother force, dividing children. Um, it's been attacked through the education system by pushing medications and products that create infertility, allowing abortions as a form of birth control. Now, there again, there's a place, there's a time we have to allow personal choice for that. Whatever your preferences on that based on your beliefs, I get it. But there are certain circumstances that may be warranted in there, but to use it as birth control is a whole different ball game. And that again has been this separation. It's a tearing down really of the mother role. It's a tearing down of the divine feminine in there. So all of those sorts of components, it's been attacked through GMO foods, through a lot of our green agendas, have attacked the feminine movement. They all claim to be pro it in women, but they're not. When you're destroying Mother Earth, when you're destroying the soul, you're destroying the mother energy as well. So there's a whole component in there of that. When you make the soil infertile and depleted, that's not just about your food source. That's about a very important component in the world that is necessary and needed for survival in the world. So, all the mass clearing of trees for making way for solar panels, destroying of the feminine energy going on. Um, so we've had a lot of things that have come up to try to abolish the mother energy. And when you abolish the mother energy, you abolish possibilities, you abolish abundance, you abolish a lot of success energy out. Um, the eternity energy is also connected again to our abundance, also greatly destroyed with the tampering of the earth. Um, and in this energy, we find the God, the divine source connection. It's in all organic matter. So again, when you're pushing these agendas through and it's destroying organic matter, you're destroying the eternal factor, the eternity factor, um, the divine connection factor um, in there. And a lot of technology is involved in this component. So a lot of modern conveniences, technological advancements that these days most people aren't going to be willing to do without. Those are all destroying some of that infinite eternity sort of component in there. We see this destroyed in the seven deadly sins, focusing on materialism instead of God and divine source. And so we need to make different choices here. We need to go back to pure foods. We need to preserve the wildlife, the forest, the water, the air, all of our basic resources in this component. We need to live through the soul self instead of our human desires. So a lot of pieces, and these are big changes, and we don't stop and take the time to see how far off course we have gotten with this. So this year, we're really working a lot with the law of prosperity. And it's a reminder that we need to give more. And if we are truly abundant and understand giving, then we also realize that we can never be depleted by true and genuine giving. Again, true and genuine giving doesn't come from putting our own selves in a detriment. There's a balance to be found in there because certainly we can't help people and give if we deplete everything that we have. But a lot of times we do have excess and can help in there. And the giving does help when it's done fully, from a full heart in there and whatever we have excess of. Almost everybody has excess of something that they can give in there. And when we operate in this true abundance and this wise use of power, we're implementing a combination and a balance of divine and practical wisdom. And this is where things flourish. This is where everything has possibility and opportunity, and we can really create and make things happen. We need to engage in creative activity, creative energy to generate real success. Um, so, uh, Always options in that. If I don't have a place to live and I'm physically capable of doing things, then I can always create an exchange with somebody. I can create a trade with them. Look, I'll do some work around your house. I'll take care of things around your house. Like I know somebody, he's got some great construction skills and stuff. So, he can offer those skills up in exchange for rent. He can fix things around the property, handle things around the property. And people who are in real need, they're willing to do that. And there's a certain amount of, divine alignment that goes with those types of exchanges in there. Um, the era that we're living in. So, the era happens over several years and even decades. And this influence, because it's a longer lasting influence, can be easier to overlook or to not notice as much. Now, our current era started around November 2024. So we're a little bit new into it, and it's going to be lasting until 2044, January of 2044. So we've got almost this 20-year period that this is going on in. And it's a time where things can feel more desolate. And here's the challenges. And sometimes the desolation, the hardships, the tough times bring us into greater abundance because it connects us more with divine presence and divine spirit. And that gets us to tap more within and realize how rich and how wealthy we are outside of possessions, outside of the hardships. And that helps us to tap into it. So we do have some challenges with this because during this time, it's this influence that is trying to create segregation. trying to create separation, isolation happening. And this is what we see in some of those countries where they're trying to, um, imprison people for um, even positive social media aspects. They're trying to imprison parents for disciplining their children, um, and trying to teach them good lessons in safe ways, even. They're trying to imprison people for praying. And so um, when we look at these things, that's part of where this energy comes in. Those who are incompliant, they want to be in the in group or one of the popular kids. Um, and those who don't, those who have the strength to stand on their own and be more self-sufficient. So we see this sort of division happening here. And, some seek that life of materialism, some are seeking that life of purpose in here. Some people become very self-sacrificing, and they're going to pay a price for that, for some people. And instead, we need to find a balance here. It shouldn't be all or nothing. We can't force everybody to go one way or another. Um, and I think we can see this happening as we're kind of splitting into these different um, lifestyles, if we want to say that. Um, in this time, what we can really see is that um, we can see the martyr complexes coming up, and people need to deal with those complexes. The martyr energy can be very strong. And some of this, again, is about trying to make ourselves look better. For some people, that's what it is. Look at me. Look at all the good deeds I'm doing. Look at this. Look at that. Look at how great I am. I made all of these accomplishments. Well, that's part of that martyr energy, that attention seeking energy. And we have to shift the priorities. Um, you can't force people um, into things. And so, but sometimes people will be forced into it when they are not physically able to do something, when they don't have the resources to do things a certain way, they will be forced into shifting their priorities. And I think we could see that as well, where people have been very materialistic and then they start to experience these losses, and then they're shifted to focus again on things of a true priority because they can't afford all the extras in there. We're probably going to see a lot of people during this time period returning to churches, returning to even monastic lifestyles, living in isolation, living off grid because they're like, I just don't want to deal with people. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't like where things are going. So again, this separation. So some of it may be by choice and some of it may be forced on people. But this is also going to lead people to return, I think, a lot to natural remedies, um, to grow their own medicinals, to find ways to take care of themselves. We're probably going to see a higher, until the end of this era, a higher sort of burnout energy, exhaustion happening in people. And we need to take that into account. People are worn out. We're going to see probably a lot of illness happening during this time. And it can bring some pretty hard times on us. So here again, even in the blessings, we could have these hardships. People can get some good fortune, but then there may be illness to deal with that uses some of that. That's part of why I say don't just go get reckless in those resources. What we're really doing is we're transitioning towards the soul's path. We're transitioning out of a materialistic mindset more towards the soul's path mindset. And religions oftentimes will portray this time period as part of God's wrath out there. That's for somebody to decide based on their own beliefs or not. I'm not going to make the judgment call on that. There are definitely things that are a bit more on the biblical side, and connected to resetting things during this time. And that's oftentimes when we are going through these resets in points in times, things are not pretty to see. They're not always pretty to experience. They don't always feel good in there when we're making these shifts because we've gotten into these comfort zones and we've lost touch with a lot of our skills and our capabilities. Um, this is a time that the earth is cleansing. and reclaiming. So when we see this happening, we're probably going to see a lot of things happening with weather patterns, a lot of things happening with tectonic shifts and plate shifts and volcano eruptions and all kinds of different things happening around the earth as it's adjusting and readjusting and resetting itself. Um, but that's got to happen. Things have to be adjusted. They've got to be repositioned. They've got to be realigned and things. We could see a lot of pestilence, a lot of disease. And again, you have a two-edged sword on this, right? Because you have these things that are being released by corruption. You have all this poisoning that has been put into the system, and that's got to clear. And, that is going to create disease. And of course, as corruption loses power and control, it's going to unleash more things as well. So, it's going to have that retaliation factor to it in there, which brings it back to we've got to take care of our health. We've got to take care of these basic pieces. We can see an axis tilt during this time, and we could see some shift in continent locations. Are we talking as big as what, happened around Atlantean times or something like that? Maybe not, maybe not yet for that. But we could definitely see some movement happening, and that can definitely, that can affect villages, that can affect rural areas, that can wipe out areas. A lot of earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, landslides happening. Might see canyons open up that haven't been there before. You might see mountains collapsing and falling down in there. So some things are going to rise, some things are going to fall in this. And when you start putting all these pieces together, what we're really seeing is the destruction that is paving way for new beginnings. So this is part of processes, part of dealing with what we've created, part of transitions, part of shifts, but we've got to be smart. We don't want to choose things that are going to continue to destroy and to create issues and devastation. We want to find our ways to come into these new beginnings without total devastation. And I think that's one of the great challenges probably in the human race. So to get an idea of parallel times in history, we want to go back to the last time this happened, which was around 1778 to 1798. We saw a lot of great revolutions, major changes in personal rights and social order. The Constitution was drafted, Industrial Revolution, and the period of Enlightenment started. Women's rights were made known. Again, that feminine energy being present. So we'll probably have more things coming up around that, around constitutional rights, women's rights. Probably have some more Enlightenment movements coming forward in things. In the mid 1500s, this pattern allowed the spreading of the Bible coming out. So people had the power to question authorities. They were breaking free of what they were being told to do by political structures. So uh, this isn't going to go away quickly. We're going to be dealing with this for a while. Diseases will probably be the prominent cause of life in there, and there's many ways that they can come. It's going to hit animals, it's going to hit plants, people. I know I've heard RFK Jr. talk about, the stronger infestation of diseases through ticks. We've heard Bill Gates talking about how he's going to release things through ticks, through mosquitoes, things like that. So yeah, it's going to hit in a lot of different components there, which again, we've got to be able to take care of ourselves. We can't sit back and rely on all these technologies and other things because time and time again, we've proven, you take the power grid down, the electric goes out, these things don't work. There's a lot of them that don't work. Some of them do, some of them don't, but you can't rely on them. You got to learn, to have your own things on hand, and they're going to be very basic things to keep on hand. I know, my stuff is not very expensive at all. My whole medicine cabinet is probably, that could last me 6 months, probably is like $100, just with natural things that work on multiple things in there. So yeah, the diseases we do really have to be watching out for. We could learn a lot more about health and diseases, and that would be the positive side, as opposed to having just disease spread. learning a lot more about that. And again, this is where we see the reclassification of drugs and pharmaceuticals. And when we do that, we could do the research on things and really bring out what they're doing and the impact that we're having. And we could start learning the impact. Okay, vaccines have been happening for X amount of years, a couple of hundred years, whatever it's been. And now we're seeing, over this period of time, here's what we've seen happen. Diseases have also increased. Is that just coincidental? Or, what's going on? So I think we'll have a lot more coming out about labs, gain of function things. There can be all kinds of things coming out around this. We could be even taken back to medieval styles of living, which is seen probably mostly more in your socialist and your communist countries. And what this does is it alleviates the middle class. So you have, a ruling class, a wealthy class, and then you have your peasants and your serfs and your worker people. But you don't have anybody in the middle who actually can think for themselves or influence anything. Because when you put everybody in poverty, you have total control because you're controlling them through their basic needs. That's what we see in these social credit score systems is like, okay, if you don't do what we want, we're going to shut off your food, your card won't work, and everything is attached to that. So you can't have anything. And if somebody is caught giving you food, when your credit is cut off from you, when your social credit score has made your equipment stop working, then they will be penalized. So, this is some pretty dangerous territory. It's not for the good of the people. In my opinion. We could see a return to agricultural lifestyles, bigger movement to live off the land. I think in areas like where I live, that is definitely going to be the case. People are going to be happy to do that. Um, but then this can also lead to, having to do without technology and not being able to get that. That could be the punishment for self-sufficiency during this time. We could see ghost towns emerge, and this would come from either people leaving areas or smaller towns that get wiped out from disease or natural shifts in the earth or things that are happening with storms or whatever, and people might go to the city seeking security in things and prefer to know that, hey, if I go to the city, I can get a job, I can, make a life for myself. Um, and so this too can kind of get people to turn against each other, seeking the power, the control factor over things, um, kind of like the old West days. We're going to take this down, Um, it's not necessarily good. Now, we could also move in a very futuristic direction, which brings up more of a sort of dystopian sort of environment, and everything's all technology and AI run. Elon Musk talks a lot about that future. Um, and when we do that, we lose all connection to Earth. It's not going to be a very good thing. It's more of a space-like setting. We'll have very little sun. Or organic life. We'll get pictures of what Earth once was, or those stories may get passed down over time, but nothing will necessarily be real. I don't think that we're totally in for that because I think there's too many people that won't buy into that. Um, and I have a lot of faith in Earth to reclaim itself. Maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I believe in that. And we can choose a path where many spiritual people seek out. And this is much more of a community style living, a very simple way of living where people are in harmony. You've got a skill, okay, you're going to be responsible for taking care of that in our community. Oh, you've got this. Oh, okay, well, you're older now, so you're going to be our wisdom keeper and you're going to help guide people. I think, it will be based around not needing AI or technology being used and drawing more on divine senses, divine gifts in things, physical skills for surviving in things. And many of these things, of course, can overlap. So, for example, you may have a lot of AI and technology or even smart cities coming up that are your city components. And then you might have very rural environments. Your rural environments may become very non-AI, more remote, more disconnected. um, from other things. So, you know, I don't think that in the end, all of these city environments are going to survive. To a certain aspect, we're always going to have those components. But, I think that, because it's so easy to shut down so much of the stuff that they are based on, that, I just don't see it necessarily working out well. Um, and I think we're going to learn a lot more about how technology advances and how that does destroy organic matter and how that is connected to probably illness and famine and diseases and things like that. So again, we're finding out a lot of those things through the green technology and stuff. So if we're going to survive this era, we've got to know our own value and worth. The humans are far more valuable than what, we've been given credit for, far more valuable in things. So we've got to really know that value and know that worth and not give it up, not give it up to all the technology. It's one thing to have something be a useful tool. It's something else to turn all decision making and all functions over to it in there. We've got to stop competing with each other, and we've got to get back to a recommitment to God, and support and grow divine presence on earth. This is all going to be very critical. When we get into the first quarter of the year with this era, um, January 1st through March 11th, a lot of abundance energy is magnified. So again, I think we've got a lot of this good fortune energy coming in. Um, there's less of a focus on material things and money and more of a focus on benefiting people and animals and the earth and looking in that direction and the well-being, of people and things, taking priority over material things in there. So I think shifts in that. But again, we've got to discern between those who are truly in need and those who are being freeloaders. Many people are living in the illusion that they have nothing to give. And again, that's not true. We talked a lot about abundance and there being so many other things to give besides just money and things. We want to focus on what we have, what we want to have success in. So this can be a good time to really put our energy into where we want to see successes. Again, this is not necessarily an immediate success. This is something that is going to unfold over time. We've got to stay committed to it all the way through until it's finished. We've got to see it through to the completion. We've got to take the steps and make the effort along the way in there. And knowing our self-worth and value in all of this, it's going to be hard to be in true abundance if we don't know that. We have to know that to be in abundance. And we got to be in abundance if we're going to create the successes. So it's definitely a cycling piece in there. When we get into March 12th through June 30th, so that second quarter of the year, basically, we've got to continue standing in the self-worth and value. We've got to let go of seeking the fortune, the fame. And we could see some of the collapse. If we're on a good path, we will see the collapse of those people who have sought fortune and fame and who are still staying addicted to that and using that to make themselves better than other people in there. And I think some of that is going to collapse. So we really want to support and nurture finding value and worth. And this is a time where it can be very easy for people to fall into victim mindsets during this time, especially if things are stagnant or blocked. People get very panicked in a way when things are not just zipping right through down the line. And we got to have some patience. We got to allow for divine timing. We got to stop and go, okay, well, what's happening? What needs to be readjusted in here? And sometimes we just need a pause, just like a song, you need a pause between the beats to make the song. And sometimes that's just needed. We need to get still and center a little bit because when we do that, our energy becomes refocused. We got to stop and do those checkpoints and go, okay, are we still on track? Are we still working with God and divine source, or are we getting greedy here and things? And knowing that difference. So we definitely will not be supported if we're in those victim mindsets. We want to stay out of them. Again, a lot of that is going to come from people who are not operating in our best interest, who are trying to have control over us. And they want to get us into that victim mindset. and we need to stay out of that in there. So this is going to be a great time for divine service. We'll see more of that emphasis coming up. More people coming together to take care of their community, I think will become a bigger focus for a lot of people, realizing, look, okay, we can't rely on government, we can't rely on this, we can't rely on that. We've got to take care of ourselves. And this divine service is really going to pull people out of that victim mentality. When we help people who are less fortunate, when we help take care of animals in the world, when we help the earth become strong, then we get out of our victim mindset. We start to realize more and more how blessed and abundant and fortunate we are, even when we don't have a lot of resources in there. So we're really finding out, who truly supports us, who is working against us. This is where the leadership factor is really going to come into play. We're going to see those leaders who are working for the people and those leaders who aren't working for the people. We want to focus on finding ways to strengthen relationships and partnerships. But again, we've got to understand, are we creating partnerships based on corruption? Are we selling out? We see this a lot in different situations where somebody is so desperate to put something through that they sell out. They sell a piece of their soul. They sell out to corrupt people who then have power over them in order to make something happen. And in the end, it doesn't play out. It doesn't play out well. Those corrupt sources take out, and we don't actually get to complete doing our dreams or our passions or things like that. We don't actually get to put them forth because they start dictating everything to us in there. So a lot of caution on that. And then in the last half of the year, we're going to be having a lot of experiences. And this is the part of the year that I think can get challenging in our world because we have to learn things. And for most people, the only way they're going to learn is if they go through the experience themselves. So like you can hear up and down about, Nazi camps or the Great Depression or these hard times or famine times throughout history or this or that. But unless you actually go through some form of that experience, you don't actually understand it. Unless you actually stand on some of those hardships, unless you actually face war, you don't really understand what it's like to be in a war zone. And so some of these experiences can be very challenging and even scary at points, but it is about teaching us, and we want to keep our focus on that. What can we learn? What can we take away from this experience? And the sooner we start to, again, open our mind up, look at things from these different perspectives, expand beyond our own personal view on something, we can start to really learn what's happening. We got to get out of our own head, our own way, our own judgments, our own perceptions on things to get there. And the sooner we can get to some of those understandings, the less harsh those experiences will be. The more we resist it, the more we stay in battle and try to demonize these people or those people or whatever, the harder and the longer those lessons are going to take to learn. So again, this is a kind of ongoing thing, but this is happening the last half of the year. And we want to, just really look at if we need to make changes in the desires and goals that we have to help bring them into um, not just being our will, but what is in alignment with God's will, divine will of things. Um, and that's where the true blessings, that's where the true fulfillment is in things. So if we walk in human will, we will experience burnout. That's where part of the burnout comes from, is trying to push our will forward. Frustration surfaces under that. Things become a huge struggle. We end up in more despair. But when we do that, we also burn out our thyroid. We burn out our adrenal glands. And, this is why our energy drops off when we're going through these struggles, because that's all getting burned out in there. But when we follow the will of God, when we follow the will of divine source, then we provide support, we provide nourishment to the thyroid and the adrenal glands. And even if we have challenges, we can get through them. So here again, that connection is very, very critical. And then more of how these influences play out in the year. There's so much in here. We've got to be careful of the lies, the deception, the manipulation. That does come up in the first half of the year. So again, these people presenting to be humanitarian when they are not. People presenting to be charitable when they're greedy. We've got to be able to see through those things. Um, Checking things out thoroughly because like even healthy foods can be unhealthy, have chemicals, have connections to pharmaceutical companies. A lot of our vitamin and supplement companies are run by pharmaceutical companies. Um, when you get into the deeper layers of them, so they're not always as healthy as you think they are in there. Um, so looking to those components, lots of focus on the health in there, looking more to food to be our healer. Foods that are naturally antibiotic, antiviral, antifungal, antimicrobial, those kind of components that we can work with. Looking at, there's all kinds of foods out there, all kinds of inexpensive natural options to nourish through. Rest is another big component. Um, there can be attempts to continue to contaminate, food supply, air, water, oceans. But likewise, we have that opportunity to focus on cleaning those things up as well. So, yes, the hardships can be there, but there are also opportunities to change things. It's just we may become more aware that we have this contamination, and then we have to make the wise choice to do something about that in there. So this is again a huge time of transformation. We've got to get in that divine alignment. Observation is going to be very important and powerful in things, and seeing these different perspectives, not just our view, but the other person's point of view. And we've got to work it as a team. Even when we have differences, we need to learn how to work as a team with things. Now, from basically May through the middle of October, uh, I think we're going to see more challenges come in during that time. So again, a lot of the easier, fluid, fun, abundant energy is more in the first half of the year. The second half of the year has a lot more of these challenging experiences to go through. But we need to keep in mind that no matter how cruel other people get, we need to stand in spirit. We need to stay with that. We need to stay connected with that and not let them pull us into their misery of things. Um, and this mostly comes from people seeking power and control, who have more resources, material wealth. They're trying to use that to dominate other people still. Um, but those people just aren't happy. It doesn't matter what they acquire. They can have much wealth and riches, and you know that doesn't give them happiness. Those things don't. You can't buy happiness, as they say, not true happiness. Um, People want to be free, they want to explore places. So again, this need for connection with things of real value comes up. We still have lies, deception, manipulation, people trying to control others, victimize them until they comply. And that's where, again, we've got to stand in these principles. And we either say, either I'm not going to support you, I'm going to walk away, I'm going to do whatever I need to do, or I'm going to stand up to you, but I'm not going to remain in this victim space, and I'm not going to just do whatever you want to do and give you total power and command over my life. Um, there's a lot of attempts to sabotage and discredit those who choose truth and integrity, and are unwilling to comply and submit. So, this can come back to censorship things that we see happening. This can come back to making life challenging or difficulty for people. This is, again, going to be stronger in socialist and communist and dictatorial structures than it will be, in countries like that are a republic, or, have more freedom, and protect the rights of the people in them. So there are a lot of narcissistic patterns coming out during this time and getting activated. Um, and we probably don't want to spend a lot of time or give them a lot of energy or attention, honestly. Because they will do what they think will get them attention, uh, good, bad, or otherwise, in there. Um, and then we got to keep our focus on quality work with integrity, and that is going to bring success. That is what people are going to get behind. They're tired of people just being promoted up because they know somebody or getting, beneficial outcomes because they know somebody or partnered with somebody or that sort of thing. It's the focus is on quality and integrity. It's not about skin color. It's not about sex. It's not about religion. It's about can you do the job and how well can you do the job? And will you do that job with integrity? And that's going to be a huge piece that again pushes us into successes, pulls us out of victim energy. And the more that people feel like they're losing power and control over their life, the more likely they are to find ways to be self-sufficient. So again, that kind of splitting going on in people, considering which way do I want to go? Do I want to have more self-control? Do I want to have more government control? There's pros and cons, as we could say, in each situation, and people have to choose which way they're going to go with things. Um, but we definitely do not want to choose what removes choice. We want people to be able to have choice, even if it's something that we don't want. People need to be able to choose things for themselves. You don't want it to just become an order where people don't have any choice, whether they take it or not. You don't want it all mandated out. Um, and this is part of the choice, but the pros of having choice far outweigh the detriments of having no choice in things. So this can create some power battles, whether we should have the right to choose something or not the right to choose, or that will be a central focus in arguments probably, during this last half of the year of people saying, but it's my right to do this, and there's some mixture on that and things have to be looked at almost case by case in some of these situations in there. And yes, it's your right to choose something, but you don't get to harm other people in that process, So it's your right to choose to own a gun. It's your right to choose to open carry. It's your right to choose to have a dog. It's your right to choose to have a home. But you don't get to just go kill people with that. That is, if you make that, you can have the right to choose that, but if you choose that, there will be consequences for that. So I think that that's kind of the piece in that. Um, and this can just again be a very physically challenging time, which again, the successes roll in, prepare for those challenges, get something set aside. It's a time when we see a lot of reprioritizing of things. We could see job loss happening during this time. Um, People who aren't complying getting pushed out of things. Um, and again, people just being worn down, and that leads to the illness. They're worn down, they're exhausted. Their body can't fight things off as easily when that is happening. And this is, especially true where people overextend themselves for money. That's going to be the particular thing in there. So when we start looking at our starseed influences, and we just have a couple of sections here left to get through. But when we start looking at the starseed influences, every few years we receive a new grouping of souls coming in, and they come in as this sort of collective, and so this energy is connected to the births that we're seeing, the types of souls, the types of energy those babies will have. But it's also because when they're birthed in, it creates an activation of that energy in our world. So it's like planting a seed. They're bringing the seeds in for a certain type of energy, which we probably won't see for a while down the line, like until they become adults. We're talking 20 years down the line, but that seed will be activated. That energy becomes activated. So we see it both in them as people, and we see it starting to play out in our world. And our current starseed grouping comes in starting uh, late January 2026 in here. So we have this brand new grouping that's coming in, and they'll be coming in through May of 2038. So we're starting really a whole new cycle of star seeds coming in. And these souls are really much more extroverted, much more outspoken, much more vocal about things, assertive, aggressive. This is where our activists come from. And that means that we can see more activism also going on in our world as a result of that. They have these big, bold personalities about them, ton of energy about what they want to do. They're real go-getters, so to say, in the world. They've got to be physically active. They don't do well with just sitting down and being still. They get bored really easily in there. Um, so, and they're very creative. They're naturally creative. They're not stupid, but they're very creative. And, so this is going to be an interesting combination. They're a bit challenged in how to bring their ideas into reality. So they're great at having ideas, not so great at executing those ideas in the world. And especially because they have a much shorter attention span. So, they do really great, like, hey, I've got this great idea. Okay, hire a team of people to execute it and do it for me, and I'll move on to the next thing. That's the type of personality. They've got to, they have the ability to work in a wide variety of careers, to do a wide variety of things. They will help us to deal with stress and tension, or they will be the cause of it. So again, they could be the provokers, or they could be the peace bringers. Two totally different way. And this again plays into that division component that we saw or that I talked about before, where it can create some separation in there if they are disruptors of peace. But likewise, they could also be the ones that help to harmonize and unify people in the world. And um, the challenge is they do have a strong need to be right all the time. Um, and that's going to be hard for them to deal with, and that can put a lot of stress and tension uh, on those people around them. That really wears on the self-worth of other people. That can put a lot of people off, kind of isolating them. Um, so they have this strong need to be better than other people. And that comes from really deep-rooted insecurities that they're working through. So that's going to be huge. And when they want to be seen, they're really creative at getting attention. So that's kind of a manipulative energy in a way. They're really good at being deceptive and manipulative to get what they want. So upbringing is going to be really important with them. They really need a strong emphasis on truth and integrity uh, in their upbringing to help offset some of this. They've got a huge love and thirst for power. So, again, we're talking this group that's being born in can be CEOs, they can be world leaders, they will probably rise to some positions of powers. They'll create companies and corporations and philanthropy organizations, a lot of strong entrepreneurs in those that are being born in that can create a lot of growth for our world. So, a lot of growth and development coming in during this period of time, these 12 years, is going to be big in there. But their challenges come from arrogance and aggressiveness in things. And that just rubs people wrong, especially older people, especially elders, so to say. This probably won't do well with them. And they're very focused on their own selves and not considering other people too much, very focused on material things. What can they get from others? Um, and no concern for how abusive they are. I don't think that that even really enters their consciousness a whole lot. Again, it's just about what they want and not concerned for the impact that has on other people. In there, their anger can easily get out of hand. That can put them in a more abusive nature. And again, we can see that type of personality rising or activated in our world, even in adults. But when their heart is open, when their heart centers are open, and they really get into caring about people, they become very generous, very loving, a positive humanitarian, a positive philanthropist, so to say, in the world. Um, Nothing is too good for those that they love, and they will go out of their way with generosity for the people they care about. Um, they will like expensive things, extravagant things, nice things. Um, but they want to try to appear to be humble. So definitely a deceptiveness there. They want to appear to be humble, but it's like, look at me, I'm in my jeans and my t-shirt, relaxing on the beach. but they're in $1,000 a night room. You know, that's the type of irony in there. The men are likely to be very heavy masculine, which means we can also see this increase of heavy masculinity coming up in the world. And they want a beautiful woman to support them, to make them look good. So they're kind of looking for that eye candy. That's where we could see a huge difference in ages as they become adults in there. The women of this grouping are really fiercely independent, by ironically insecure. So a lot of them may look for that sugar daddy. You know, they're kind of a good match for each other in that way, even though they're sitting in these extreme polarities out there. Again, very protective of those they love, and they don't tolerate interferences from others. Um, they're going to be here to teach us about strength and confidence. And that's a good thing. We can do it. And they're going to be here to help us toughen up. You know, they're not going to care whether you like the words they use or, you know, using nice language or making you feel better. They're going to put it right in your face. And they may not be the best communicators at times in this. Um, and we're going to learn from them how we stand on our own, how to hold our own, how to not be so offended by things. Um, but they could also collapse under their own need to control and be dominating. Their abrasiveness will stress people, pushing, they'll use it to push people to turn their power over to them. Um, they've got a very superficial, very cold demeanor about them, which reminds us how easily we're replaced in the world. And we will learn from them because they are so superficial. We'll learn to look beneath the surface in things and not just the initial exterior appearance in there. Because a lot of times they do have ulterior motives behind their actions and things. And they can work in most fields. Again, they can be military leaders, career military people, artists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, politicians, world leaders, top level managers. Um, they might also choose professions that are very adventurous, you know, travel industries, flight attendants, pilots, rock climbing guides, ski instructors, you know, things that allow them to use that abundance of energy, physical energy that they have. Um, but they put a lot of pressure on themselves to be perfect. You know, their insecurities make them try to become very perfect. And when we look at how this is playing out this year, really looking at the main part of the year, in the first half of the year, um, they're really bringing in this sort of balance and homeostasis. So even though it feels very abrasive, it's kind of like we've become too soft in culture. So now we need this abrasiveness that's going to come in and toughen us up again a little bit. So they're providing a balance. They give us a break. They encourage fun, which I think is a positive thing. That's balancing out this overworking component that we've had in society, bringing in more spontaneousness, but we have to be careful. Spontaneous can be great, impulsiveness not so great in things. And all forms of the arts, they love it. Um, Connecting or participating with the arts gets them kind of unstuck. It gets them out of creative blocks that they have. It gives them a chance for personal expression without judgment. Um, but again, you know, they may not be very sincere about things. They'll use a lot of charming behaviors, flattery, things like that, but they may not be sincere about what they're saying or doing. And that's that kind of I'll buy you mentality. You know, it's like the sugar daddy that buys the beautiful woman to be on his arm and says, "Oh, you're beautiful, honey," but, you know, doesn't necessarily mean it. There's no love behind it in there. Um, But we need to remember that, you know, it's not just about doing a task, it's about how we do a task and things. And again, this team skill, we need to blend our skills, you know, so they're going to have to learn a lot about giving, about working with other people. If they're really going to make the bigger accomplishments, they've got to be able to build a strong team and things. Fulfillment during this time is going to be found through self-sufficiency, and it comes when we strengthen our skills and we're developing new skills. So uh, it's there, it's possible. On the nice side, this can give people a little bit of boost of physical energy, even when they're tired and they're burned out on things. And then when we look at the second half of the year, again, there's more personal challenges, more personal struggles. So again, we get some of this relief at the beginning of the year, but the second half of the year can do it. So again, we want to reserve physical strength, resources all the way along the line so that we can deal with things. Intuitions and dreams are very strong, but the logical mind is not very strong. It can be very hard for people to focus. Not a great time for making major decisions. Things are coming through more intuitively, more symbolically for people at this time. And that can lead to a lot of genuine misunderstandings, which could be behind the challenges that we face at this time. And we can make good successes, but we've got to engage the skills, the talents, the expertise of others, not just try to do it all ourselves. We need to go, okay, I know about this, but I don't know about this other piece, and let me go draw on somebody who's got the expertise in that area. So we got to, not be so prideful that we don't draw on what others have to offer. I think that's very important. And we're going to be learning a lot and need to learn to let go of having to control everything. So those people who are very OCD, very need to control everything, have everything precisely in order, years in advance, probably will struggle a bit with this influence. We've got to let go of controlling things. We've got to let go of the micromanaging and allow ourselves to embrace more of the experience. Be able to stray, be able to make adjustments, be able to make changes, and not just be so stuck on that. We can also recognize and learn things from others, and that's going to be important, not just accepting that, thinking that we know it all, but always trying to learn from what others are doing and how they're handling things. And this could also bring a period of being in limbo, and that is also going to be frustrating for all those go-getters who are just, wanting to go. Let me out of the gates. Um, and, on one hand, we're leaving what's full of materialism and the cliques and the groupings. And on the other hand, we're moving more onto the soul's path. So this is a beneficial transition, but there's usually a limbo period that feels a little sparse in there, that feels a little tough to get through, that's a little bit challenging. So we've really got to make sure we're processing things, we're getting the rest, we're taking care of ourselves, all of that in there. So again, higher energy at the beginning of the year, lower energy in the second half of the year. And then our next piece is our generation. And a generation, again, is kind of a group within a starseed grouping. So they're, again, another grouping of people who are being birthed in, bringing another component of energy into the world, as well as, this is going to indicate what the types of personalities are of the kids that are being born in. And we transitioned into a new generation in 2019 in there, and this will be going on until April 26th. So we're actually seeing also a transition of souls uh, coming through, new transition happening with that. Um, and then we'll kind of waver in and out of this for a little bit. But this generation that is coming through are rebels. Again, that activism sort of energy, they're not going to be tolerating being told what to do. You know, um, they're going to fight against anything that disrupts their peace and their freedom of speech, their ability to be generous. They're going to fight against people who damage the earth. So this is all very activist kind of energy. Anybody who impinges on their rights or their choice of beliefs, they're going to be fed up with a lot of traditional structure. So this is going to kind of buck the system because in one hand, we're going back to certain structures. On the other hand, we're going to have these coming in to disrupt the structure in there. So again, a lot more activism energy, I think, could come out in the second, this second half of the year, I think more so. Um, But they are actually pretty practical. They're pretty realistic about things, and that's a great thing. They can enjoy the fine things in life, but they're happiest with the simple things. They prefer a humbler lifestyle in things. They don't really care for all the fancy things, even though they can enjoy them. Music is a powerful influencer for them. And in early adulthood, they'll probably spend a lot of time in places with music or music events or um, playing with a band or creating music. So this is going to be, this is kind of finishing out an era of musicians or bringing in upcoming musicians. Kindness and helping others are very important. So see, they're actually going to balance off some of those that are coming in under the era influence. Again, you see these two totally different components, right? One that are very cold, very arrogant, another that are very pro kindness. So they're going to be kind of providing a balance to each other, and they need a lot more peace. They're not going to be, they just kind of want to be left alone in some ways. Um, they want to be centered a lot more in unconditional love with each other. They have a strong drive to find their soulmates. So love is going to be very important in their life. Love relationships are going to be important. Um, they're much more introverted even when they're out in public, and they'll probably get along with most each other. So again, this polarity energy that is there and going to be present is going to be interesting to watch. But their really deep nature will only keep those in their life that they sincerely love and care for. So they might be able to get along with a lot of people, but there will be very, very few people on their inner circle. They're very intense people. They put a lot of their whole self into what they're doing. They give it their all. They love intensely, and they need a partner with depth. Their partner has to have some sort of depth, some sort of thinking capability, big heart energy if they're going to settle down with them. Um, they need somebody who can handle their mood swings because they will tend to be on the moody side. Um, when we make this shift in at the end of April of 2026, and we come into it, that next grouping is going to be with us until May of 2033. So this influence will be coming in throughout that time. And those ones that are coming in at that point are going to be very scattered in their energy. They're going to jump around a lot. Their thoughts are going to skip. It's going to be hard for them to focus on things, hard for them to stick to one thing. Um, they're just, schedules are going to be difficult for them. Their mind is quick and alert, but they just can't stay focused. So it's just like jumping. It's like the dog that goes bird, or squirrel. It's like, it's going to be tough for them in traditional work environments. They're going to have to find things that give them flexibility in some way. So again, we might have a little bit of a clash. Um, this grouping wants to live really extravagantly. And just to have life be one big vacation, and that's going to be a challenge. These are the ones that might actually do better in some sort of a socialist community, but I don't think that that's going to be, they'll be drawn to some of the socialist types of structures because of that, because they want to just have that free ride. But if they actually had to live under all the restrictions of it, they wouldn't be so happy about it. So life is going to be probably pretty hard for them to deal with, I'm thinking. Um, and again, we have this split in people between people getting really focused and go-getters and people just like, nope, just going to live off the system, not do anything. Um, but when they give with their whole heart. And we do need the kindness component in there. It's just neither side can really be allowed to run rampant. They are going to be very drawn to humanitarian things, health things, earth-based ventures. So they're going to make good missionaries, good nutritionists, healers, activity directors, astrologers, astronomers, geologists, oceanographers, anything that blends science and nature is going to be probably a good focus for them. Most of them really want to just have a family, but they may have challenges with children or with their parents. So they may not have that strong family structure that they crave really deeply. And some of that comes out of having really strong opinions, being really quick to point out the shortcomings of people. They want peace in the world and they're humanitarian based. They want food for the hungry, shelter for the homeless, health for the sick. They'll probably be behind a lot of things like soup kitchens, animal therapy, animal shelters, community gardens, pulling people out of desperation. Again, we need these things, but we also need to teach them when they're being duped, when it is a drain on the system and who the true needy are versus, those who are just taking advantage of them. And they will be easily taken advantage of in many ways. They will easily buy into narratives about things. So we have to teach them otherwise. They have to learn to let go of the programming and the mindsets. Preconceived notions if they're going to thrive in the world. And this is something we will see in the world. We have to let go of these preconceived notions. Of course, we want to help people. Of course, we want these humanitarian things. Of course, we want love and peace and kindness and all those great things in the world. But we have to let go of the preconceived notions and all of the agendas around those things if we're actually going to make the difference in there. They can be naturally successful if they're doing things with quality and integrity. But there can be a strong tendency to just rely on their connections to promote them up. So again, caution there. How these influences play out, a lot of this again is differentiating who's in need and who's the freeloaders in things. Um, for some, this means people being greedy and taking advantage of others. And they're those with generous hearts. And we've got to discern. Discernment is going to be a big learning thing that we have in those first couple of months, especially as energy, abundance energy is flowing in. We're going to have to be careful of that. But it is going to be a good time to make some progression on things. It is a good time, again, to put forth things that truly are beneficial in there. And then from February through the end of April, that abundance energy it continues. There's some good successes, good windfalls coming in, good challenges and hardships, all based on how we're using our power, how wisely we're using it. And, we've got to be, that's going to be the core factor. That's going to be the key piece. Um, and people, are they helping and assisting where needed? Um, this is going to be a big thing where those born into this time are probably, they might be more self-sufficient in there because of the things they experience. They're going to learn by using their power wisely or misusing their power, or having adults or family member who does that in there. So we can have a lot of different forms in there, a lot of caring and a lot of attending to assisting to people's needs. So this could be a lot of caregivers coming in. Those born during this time, um, again, will probably find challenges with family or those who are like family. It's going to be hard for them to bond. They're going to be black sheep, and that black sheep can be either way. They can be a black sheep because they're not walking the materialistic path in things, or they could be the black sheep because they're the one that's trying to break everybody else's spirit and just is that negative person in the family. So it could be either way for them. They need a lot of sensory engagement. And if they can get more sensory engagement, more live experiences with things, they'll have less of a tendency to go down the materialistic path. And that's true with us. We need sensory experiences to happen. As we look through the basically May through the middle of September, the mind becomes much more open, much more inquisitive about things. We can work with mentors. We're more receptive to hearing um, the wisdom that people have to offer and learning from them. But we have to be careful of those people again that are trying to just suck us into something and they don't have experiences and don't have knowledge in there. Again, activists born during this time, they're going to be provokers or they're going to be those under attack because they're speaking the truth. So a lot of activism sort of energy coming up in that time. and we'll see that in the world, and we're going to have to be careful of that, where a lot of people will want to be out at protest at that time. We're going to have to be careful because there's probably going to be calls for violence, or to harm people who don't want to follow the narratives, who don't want to just comply and go with the corruption and support the corrupt leaders, or the crime that is going on. So definitely some care and some caution that has to be used. We've got to be careful of our tendencies to react during this time. Again, a lot of artists also born in this time, a lot of creative energy during this time, and that's going to be great to draw on. Um, and that shows that even though we have this intensity that's going to go on, we're also going to have some opportunities to just be fun and spontaneous and non-thinking, so to say, in things. And that will be positive. We've just got to also be very careful about confusing chemistry with soul connections. So we could think that we have this really great soul connection, but it could really just be chemistry. We'll have to give things time. We have to be careful of those people we feel very magnetically drawn to during that period. And then as we go through the middle of September through the end of the year, that's where we see a lot of the big leaders are being born. Some are true leaders. Some will help people strengthen their own skills and be self-sufficient. Others dominate and control people. They're focused on results and successes, instead of people. And and then you'll have others, they just want more of a monastic private lifestyle and don't really want to be bothered. And I think this is also some of that separation that we see coming, between those people in our world. There are either going to be those people that are going to rise up and go into these leadership positions, and then there's going to be other people like, hey, I just want to live my life, leave me alone component. So you can have everything from world leaders to teachers to dictators coming in under this influence. But again, a lot of experiences, a lot of things happening designed to teach us. So sometimes, again, things have to play out, they have to go through in order for us to learn what we need to learn so that we don't have to deal with these things again, or at least not for a very long time in there. During this last part of the year, a lot of old souls coming through. So these are not new souls that are coming in. These are people who have been here before and they are receptive to learning. They carry a lot of wisdom with them. They're wisdom keepers. They understand things. And again, they learn through experiences. Just hearing something isn't enough. They need to see things. They need to touch things. They need to be involved in it to really learn it in there. And we could see a lot of power battles, in attempts to control here at the end of the year. And of course, some of the people will try to do that, but those who try to gain the control, who engage these power battles deliberately to gain more power and control over people and to weaken them, those plans will backfire. There'll be mishaps, there'll be mistakes, there will be things that just block them from being able to do those things. So most people turn their power over out of fear. Most people, or because they don't understand things, they don't truly understand it. They're just going by what they're being told, or they like what somebody is saying, and they don't actually do any research or learn the depths behind things, or they cave out of compliance, in that concept of, for the greater good, or they just accept that somebody else knows what's best for them. And somebody will say, well, this is what's best for you. And they just accept that in there. So that's really a fear or guilt tactics. And we'll have to be very careful of people that are using those fear and guilt tactics to get us to take something that isn't favorable or that won't benefit us in there. And then finally, we have our world energy coming in. And we had a new set of influences come in March of 2023. And they're going to be in effect of February 2026. So really just, that first month of the year. But that's just, a little bit coming in. And then our new set of influences really kick in February 15th, 2026. And that's going to be our bigger focus. And that will go for about 2 years. So until around the middle of April 2028 in there. And this brings in some really humbling forces. This is a time where people are going to get knocked off their pedestals if they're sitting in arrogance. The narcissists, the psychopaths, the other attention seekers are probably going to get a big dose of humble pie. So all these people that thought that they could get away with things, this is probably where they're going to find out they're not going to get away with things. All these people that thought they were above the law with things, it's all going to be dosed a big bunch of humble pie. So this is going to get to be a really interesting time. I think a lot of the things that people wanted to see years ago are going to start happening probably during this time, especially with more prominent people in our world. Um, a lot of refining, a lot of polishing up through harsh circumstances. This can be stressful times for people, but we have to keep in mind it is trying to get us to a place that is going to be more favorable for us in there. So those who are already humble, they won't mind the polishing. They're like, great, great. I can deal with a little stress to come out better, and it's going to work out just fine for them. They're going to see it as an improvement, really. But those who are really stubborn and strong-willed and set in their ways are going to be brought to their knees. This is a time of humbling people. We're going to knock you off your pedestal. So, a lot of learning about true success, how to get it. Um, the experiences are about making us stronger. They're really not there to turn us down, to tear us down, or to break us down. They're there to make us stronger in things. Judgments, arrogance, all backfires. So if a fit person sees somebody carrying weight, for example, and then they blame that person for carrying that weight, um, what that fit person is going to find out is they're going to find that they start gaining weight. So there's kind of a semi-immediate karmic impact, I guess you might say, coming through at this time. Um, so that fit person might still eat healthy and exercise, but they'll still gain weight. So we've got to be extra careful about our judgments that we're making, extra careful about that arrogance that we're carrying, because when we do that, we will find ourselves in the experience that teaches us the other side of what we're judging. And there'll be people that will definitely have trouble with that. you know so it's like somebody who judges homeless people. If they see him, oh, every homeless person is useless, lazy, they're drug addicts, and so on and so forth. They just might find that they have some kind of financial issues that put them needing resources, put them in a position of being homeless. So really a big turning point, I would say, in this component here. um, the key is, can we learn from other people's experiences? Can we look at it and say, oh, I saw where that person judged this other person, and now look what's happening to them? Um, can we learn? Oh, wow, I saw this happening. And when I went and talked to the person who was being judged, wow, that wasn't the thing at all. They do all these healthy things, and their weight really isn't their problem. It's the way their body is functioning. And they haven't been able to correct that. So I think there's a lot of components there. We're clearing a lot of addictions during this time period. Um, and those addictions are really associated to having to have a comfortable life. Now, we can have a so-called comfortable life and still be humble. This is about those people that are addicted to a lot of wealth. They've got to have 5 mansions, and they've got to have 20 sports cars, and they've got to, that's not comfort, that's excessiveness there, you know. So these addictions to that excess are really going to come back to bite people, especially if they're in debt to get it. Especially if they're in debt to get it. We're going to be pushed out of our comfort zone during this time. And this being pushed out of our comfort zone is all about getting us to reestablish our connection with God, our divine source, in there. And to consider others and to look at what gives real joy, what is real success outside of these financial metrics and parameters that we've been living, under so much with things. Um, and the discomfort isn't all bad, but this is again, um, people may try to really justify their excessiveness or their comfort. And if we find ourselves doing that, we've got to let it go in this year. We've got to let go of these addictions. Okay. Um, we're going to find that the rich and the elite are unable to isolate themselves in their own neighborhoods. And they're not going to be able to ignore the um, uncomfortable aspects in the world because with all these components, what do? They're going to become targets of crime because the people committing the crimes are going, why would I go rob a poor neighborhood when I can go rob a millionaire? I mean, so it's going to get put in their face and they're going to have to deal with the things that they've been asking other people to live under. And when we look at how this is playing out this year, a good portion of the year, at least, pretty much the first half of the year, and um, the very end of the year going into 2027, good portion of that, a lot of ego battles going on. So we're really going to see the people residing in that, a lot of impatience from people. They want things done. They want them done now. They want them done the way that they want them done. They don't want to go through the process. They don't want to get the necessary experiences. So that will create frustrations for those people in there. They just want to skip right to the successes, and we can't do that. It's not going to work that way. A lot of strong, energetic forces emerging, um, and people allowing their experiences to shape and refine their journey. And that's going to be a good thing, I think. That's where we're implementing the wisdom that we're getting out of our experiences. A lot of provocateurs being activated. So, we could see a lot of that MK Ultra programming getting activated during this time, a lot of things being inverted. Um, trying to make good things look bad, bad things look good, that kind of component going on, trying to trigger the people who are trying to do good, trying to get them reactive so that they can use that reaction against them. Um, filling people in the crowd, dressing them up to look like they're, opposite of what they are. A lot more of that going on, but we don't want to react because when we do the reactions, we give them power. Balance and harmony are going to be very, very important to getting through things. So even if we have differences, we can harmonize those differences. It's just like I have certain skills and you have different skills, we have differences, but we can harmonize those skills and come up with something great. So we've got to learn that harmonizing factor. We've got to learn to get along with each other. And that is a wise use of our power, which leads us into more favorable cycles and circumstances and moves us in more positive directions along the way. We want to honor the creativity and the fun. That's part of the balance. We want to put the work in and the effort in that needs to be put in, but we also want to play. We want to have fun. We need to take time for creative endeavors and not just logical things. Um, People are going to be favored for speaking up and speaking their opinion. And no, not everybody's going to agree with what somebody's opinion is, but it's still important to hear the opinions and hear the mindsets and to listen to what people are saying because, oftentimes we're just fed the information that nourishes what we want things to be and not necessarily the truth. And until we're willing to talk things out and have reasonable conversations with people, and to discuss the differences and the different points, it's going to make it very hard to make any progress or to get the true great successes that we have the potential for in there. A lot of good business, can come forward in things towards the second half of the year. This can be more of a business, a success focus in there, but we have to stay objective in things. This is not the time to be taking sides in this. We want to stay more in that neutral ground. It doesn't mean we don't have an opinion. It doesn't mean we won't make an impact because we can still do all of those things. But we don't want to be sitting in the extremist positions because that's not benefiting anybody. And those extremist positions are not going to be the right answer, no matter which side of the fence they're on. Uh, Spontaneous energy is still going to be good. We need to brace that spontaneity, let go of controlling everything, let go of having to plan everything. Life can feel a little bit lighter, even though there's some of those intensity, if we're providing that balance and that harmonizing in there. And part of all of this is learning to have fun, learning to stop taking offense to every little thing in the world and start having some fun. Start embracing our inspiration. Stop suppressing that, getting inspired to do things, getting inspired to take action in favorable directions, drawing on the wisdom of our mentors around finding our own style in things instead of just following whatever people are doing. So it can be a great time to get assistance to help us get the successes that we want to make. So again, this is kind of a seed planting time. We have to get the skills, we have to get the wisdom, we have to draw on other people's experiences, we have to get our own experiences before we can unfold our own successes in things. Again, there can be power battles coming up with world leaders during this time. And there are going to be those that are operating, and mostly those battles are going to be between people who are standing in corruption. Um, and they will bring their own fall. So again, we kind of need to stay out of the way, let them do what they're going to do. Um, and it's going to be their egos. It's going to be those world leaders with the biggest egos who aren't willing to make a deal, who aren't willing to come to any kind of middle ground. They're just going to sit in their extremes. They're going to be the ones that are going to see um, some of this fall. And what they do is they're going to surround themselves not with people who are smart or intelligent, they're going to surround themselves with people who will follow orders. And that's the only way they can put things through is to have compliant people around them. But that means they have unqualified people. They have people who don't think well. And when that happens, mistakes are made, and then mishaps happen, and then the truth gets exposed, and then their plans kind of fall apart in there. But true leaders seek growth. They want to surround themselves with super strong people. They want to build people's skills. Again, they're focused on lifting people up, making them stronger instead of weakening them. Those seeking power and control want to weaken everybody and suppress them and control them. So, you know, all of these components, we have a lot going on. And again, stay on top of this because this is a lot of knowledge. Head over to the website, compassioncodes.com. Get your copy of 2026 so you can stay on top of it. That's only one small piece. What I'm covering here in the year is just one small piece of things. It's the overview. It's, the guidance. And if this is interesting and you want to take this journey, you want to be on top of what's happening when, get your copy. Click on the books tab, Code Journey. The links are there on the page. You can get directly there. I hope you'll share this video out. Leave some comments if you'd like to leave some comments. Um, and I hope this has been helpful. Maybe save this video so that you can go back and re-listen to it at different points, hear different things that are happening along the way, and go back in and tune into some of this information because I know it's too much to kind of process all at one time. But stay with it and hang in there. And I really hope you guys have a great 2026. I hope you maximize the influences that are available to you. And I hope that you take advantage of these very positive opportunities and work wisely in any windfalls that you happen to get along the way. Take care, everybody. Stay connected. The monthly videos will come out for world events and also on just basic life tips on my two different channels, Connecting Codes channel and the channel under my own name, Jessie on Nichols George. And let's journey the year together. Let's see what we can learn and check out the website, see all the different offerings that are there, and see what possibilities you wanted to delve into. Take care.